Well, good afternoon. It's Thursday, half two, and it's the infant feeding session. So I hope there's going to be lots of you coming on and asking loads of questions, because as you can see, I'm on my own. So Naomi's on annual leave this week. So it's much more difficult to fill those gaps when you're on your own. So I'm hoping there's going to be lots of you coming on. I can see people arriving already, and thank you so much for joining me. So today's session, as I said, is feeding. So it's infant feeding, anything to do with feeding, early days, bit of development, moving on to solid foods, talk a bit about sleep, anything that any of those aspects. I'm not probably the most up to date when it comes to visiting and what's happening in the community with regard to some visits and that sort of thing. So if it's a general midwifery question, then probably your own midwife is going to have the most up-to-date answer. If it's anything to do with feeding in the antenatal, getting ready for it in the antenatal period or in the postnatal period, with regard to establishing a supply, whether you're having problems or not having problems, then this is the forum for you. And any questions you can think of, nothing will be too stupid. We cover very similar topics many weeks, one week after another, and it obviously depends who's watching. But if you're coming on here thinking I'm a bit concerned about asking, just do it. Just ask the question, because if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it too. So I'm Alex. I am the infant feeding lead here at the John Radcliffe, and normally I'm accompanied by my sidekick Naomi, who is on annual leave this week. So there's usually two of us. So hoping there'll be lots of lovely questions coming through. I'm just going to get up on my computer, because then I can see the questions on here rather than having to read it on the screen, which is always more difficult. So bear with me while I find it. I've been very interested to see in the press, I don't know if any of you have been noticing, but the Duchess of Cambridge has been talking about getting stuff into schools and talking to teenagers about brain development. Now, any of you, out there with your babies already or expecting your babies imminently, it's well worth the read. Go and have a look. I'm not sure why we're just focusing on teenagers on this, but actually it really fits in with what we talk about a lot, about a baby's brain is constantly developing. It's a very plastic in a way that it's growing and changing all the time. And the interactions that you have with your baby, and I've said it on these sessions before, every interaction you have with your baby, whether it's a cuddle, a kiss, a hug, a stroke, singing a song, chatting to them, looking in their eyes when you're changing a nappy, all of those things are boosting oxytocin. Oxytocin is your love hormone. Oxytocin is also the hormone that grows babies' brains. It makes babies feel secure and loved and know that you're going to meet their needs, know that they can trust you. So oxytocin is a really, really important hormone, and you'll know about it because it's the hormone that contracts your uterus in labour. It's the hormone that contracts the cells in the breast for the milk to be let down and come toward the nipple. It's also your love hormone, and it's a hormone that makes you feel good, and it's the same with babies. So being cuddled and loved and kept close and not left to cry and not left to self-soothe, all of those things, being close, meeting their needs, boosts brain development and makes babies feel secure and loved. Now I can see questions coming up. I'm just going to see if I can get them on the screen. Let's see if they come up. Brilliant. Let me turn my sound off. I don't need to hear me in stereo. So, but I just think it's really well worth having a look and go and have a look. I've seen it on the BBC News under parenting, and what they say, it's relevant to anybody with a new baby or expecting a baby to have to think about. So from the point of view of your interactions with your baby, it's remembering you cannot spoil your baby. It's not possible. Your baby is hardwired to be loved and cuddled and kept close. They don't want to be put down in a cot. So if you put your baby down and they're not happy, that's because they don't expect to be there. As I keep saying to mums that I meet, we're high performing primates. We are a form of primate, like gorillas and chimpanzees, and our babies don't know what they're born as. They don't know they're humans yet, and they expect to be treated the same way as others, and other primates do not put their babies down for the first 2 years. So if you're saying, well, my baby won't go down, your baby is being really normal, and your baby wants to be in your arms, which is why we often talk about slings, meeting the baby's needs for closeness and comfort. Keeping your babies close, loving them, hugging them, kissing them, chatting to them, singing to them is all going to be doing fantastic things for their brain and it's going to be growing. All these neurons are firing off and growing, and you're going to grow a happy baby, a happy child, and a happy adult. Anyway, let's have a look and see what some other people have said. Esther's come on and said I'm amazing. Thank you very much, Esther. That's very lovely of you. Yeah, me doing it on my own. Happen to be brave. Emma has said baby is 3 weeks old and in the past or so is very unsettled in the evening, still feeding lots, normally over 12 times per day. I'm not sure if baby has colic. If so, should I change my technique or latch? So Emma, first off, it's very common for babies to feed an awful lot in the evenings. We call it cluster feeding. Many mums find it lasts for a couple of hours. It might be that your baby's feeding from 6 till 8 or 7 till 9, and it's really, really common period of time that they're unsettled and they want to be on the breast, and they'll go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and eventually they go. If it is cluster feeding, then we can't tell you when it's going to stop, but we believe that what's happening is the baby's learning how to take more on board, and that they are eventually going to help them be able to last a bit longer at night. They're working towards that. However, it's always worth looking at positioning and attachment, because we know that if there's a cumulative effect during the day when the baby's not on as well as they could be, then actually it can make the evenings even more difficult. So it may be well worth just getting someone to check your positioning and attachment. It could be, if you've already come in to see us, I don't know that you are, I don't recognise your name to be honest, but it could be chatting to OBS, and it could even be done online with them or one of their drop-ins. In Abingdon, in what was formerly known as the Abingdon Baby Cafe, which I think is now the Abingdon Breastfeeding Cafe, but it's there to support mothers with feeding. The Latch League may be able to help too. At 3 weeks, I think you must be beyond your community midwives, but your health visitors could help too. So Emma, it may be well worth having a look and just making sure that you're doing it as brilliantly as you can. One of the things about feeding is that when it comes to positioning and attachment, there's nearly always room for improvement. So I often use a personal example, as I have 3 children, and when I trained as an NCT breastfeeding counsellor, my youngest one was 1, and I'd already fed my other children, and I changed the way I fed him because of what I learned through my breastfeeding counselling, and I improved it, and yet I'd fed 2 children already. So there is always room for improvement. So it may be well worth, Emma, just getting someone to check. And if there's nothing that can be improved on, hopefully it's just cluster feeding that will pass soon. But it is, I know how debilitating it can be when you've got a baby that is feeding and feeding and feeding in the evening. And even more challenging if you've got older children as well that you're trying to get to bed. But see how you get on, and if you need further support from us, then do get in touch. So, Rachel has said, any tips if baby has sore throat and feeding hurts? Ooh. Well, feeding in itself, as I've just said, releases oxytocin, and oxytocin is part of the endorphins that make you feel good. So having nice warm breast milk going over a throat will help as well. I would have thought, because it's soothing in its own right, babies love to be breastfed, that's why they like being there. It's not just milk transfer. There's so much more going on when a baby's being breastfed. They love that closeness and comfort. It meets their needs for that. So I would have thought just trying to keep going with it. Obviously, I mean, it's unusual for a baby to have a sore throat. I wonder if you perhaps need to have a chat with your GP and see. And is there any other reason that this is happening? And wonder what makes you think it's a sore throat. Can you see it's a sore throat? Is the baby unwell? When babies are unwell, as with us, they tend to eat less, they're less inclined to eat, but your baby may feed for comfort as well as the food. So Rachel, I think just maybe dig down and why has your baby got a sore throat? Do you maybe need to see the GP with your baby? And I would have thought feeding in its own right would be helpful. Perhaps give us a call and we can have a chat about it, 'cause it's quite an unusual situation to have a baby with a sore throat, and see what happens. Maybe you can put a bit more further down and let me know a little bit more. But moving on to Emma. So sorry, Rachel, I think we'll come back to you. If you can give me a bit more, that would be lovely. Emma has said a dummy has been mentioned, but I'm worried this will affect feeding as this has been successful so far. Do you have advice on use of dummies, and if we do introduce one, how it will affect breastfeeding? Thanks. So the concern, Emma, with a dummy is if it interrupts breastfeeding. So is the baby sucking on the dummy instead of feeding from the breast? So when we have babies that are struggling to maintain their weight, the last thing we want to be doing is giving them a dummy. Dummies can meet the baby's needs for closeness and comfort and for sucking. Well, not closeness and comfort, for sucking. But actually, what came first? The breast came first. So I'm just thinking, so you're thinking about the dummy in the evening, aren't you? Whether that would help. The other thing to bear in mind about evening feeds is that during the day your milk's constantly changing, as anyone who's watched this before knows. Your milk's constantly changing through the day, through the weeks, through the months, to meet your baby's needs. And actually through the day what happens is when you tend to be very full, most mothers find they're quite full in the morning, they have a bit more than they need in the morning. That tends to be lower fat milk. When you're feeling full, the proportion of fat in that milk is lower than when you're feeling less full, so empty-ish. You're never empty though, but when your breasts don't feel full, the proportion of fat in your milk is much higher. So although your baby's coming to the breast quite a lot, and they may not be getting big volumes of milk, what they're getting at that point in time is really, really high fat milk. So this is why we think it's contributing towards helping the baby to sleep at night, because they're getting very small dollops of very, very high fat milk that will help keep them going and give them those reserves to go that little bit longer. So yes, you could try a dummy and see if it works, as long as breastfeeding is going well, as long as it's not replacing a feed. And that's the concern, is, you know, if your baby is gaining really, really well and we've got no concerns about your baby, then maybe there's a place for it. When there's any concerns about weight gain, then a dummy can actually aggravate that situation, and it may not be ideal, because it's very much weighing up the pros and cons in your personal situation. What some mothers might do is, as I mentioned, mums often have more milk than they need in the mornings, and some might express some off in the morning and maybe use it in the evening if they are finding the evenings are a little bit challenging, and so maybe give some milk at that point in time, some expressed breast milk. So that could be an option too. I think have a look at your own situation and think whether a dummy would be appropriate for you in that situation, and weigh it up. But yeah, it's not a clear-cut one when it comes to dummies, I'm afraid. Danielle has said, my baby's 2 weeks old tomorrow. You might remember seeing me in hospital. I do. And initially when my baby's born, I had a big supply of milk. I was producing too much. I followed your advice to reduce it. I'm now not producing enough. How can I get my milk back in? Thank you. Oh dear, Danielle, I'm sorry. I hope I haven't contributed to that. So I think it's going to be upping that pumping, because you were pumping off huge amounts when I first met you, weren't you? I remember meeting you. It would be increasing the expressing and pushing your supply. You have the capacity to produce that amount of milk, because we've seen it already. So thinking about offering the breast and then pumping afterwards. When you say you're not producing enough, is your baby struggling to gain? Are they not pooing and weeing appropriate to age? But it would be pumping after the feed, so breastfeed your baby and then pump afterwards. I do remember you very clearly. We met by the room where we keep the milk on the level 5. I remember having a chat with you at the time, and I was a bit worried about you having an oversupply. Perhaps, again, I think it might be worth an individual chat, but the norm would be, when we're pushing supplies, to offer the breast and pump afterwards. And we can perhaps have a chat, and I can send you some information about pumping. If you'd send me an email, that would be great. You can do it to our infant feeding general email, which is infantfeeding.team@ouh.nhs.uk. But the key will be to push your supply again a bit more. Your baby's only the 2 weeks, so we've still got time to do that. And I'm sure you can turn it around again. I'm sorry if I've contributed to that. I was a bit concerned because you were pumping off so much initially, but let's make sure we can get you back to where you need to be, Danielle, and perhaps you could give me that. Hopefully you got my email. If you didn't get my email, you can find all our contact details for anybody who's watching. Our contact details are available on the OUH website. So if you go onto OUH and then type in maternity and feeding, you'll find us on there, and it has our email, our telephone number, and you can contact us on there. Also a link to all the videos that we made. I think I've mentioned them a fair few times. We did 7 videos. We're not going to win awards for them, but we do get the information across, and we cover things like skin to skin, hand expressing, pumping, all those sort of things. But our contact details are on there. So Danielle, please do me a favour and contact me, and I will send you information about increasing your supply again and making sure we get you back on track, and make sure you don't have a shortfall. So that would be really good if we could have a chat about that. Would be brilliant. Charlotte has said, hi Alex, hope you're well, and hope Naomi is also. I've booked my booster jab. Alicia's having her afternoon nap, so I'm having a bit of me time watching your chat. Thank you, Charlotte, and enjoy your me time. So you'll have Naomi back next week. She'll be back with us. Rachel has said, we've both got a cold. I can confirm that swallowing is very painful. He's only had a couple of proper feeds today and had some fussing and screaming at trying to feed, then giving up. Oh, poor love. Oh, Rachel. So yes, I would have thought that that actually feeding would be helpful. I'm trying to remember how old your baby is. Did you tell me at the beginning? No. Obviously, if your baby's old enough, then Calpol might be helpful, or something like that. A baby paracetamol that might help soothe the throat, take that pain away. But feeding in its own right ought to be helpful, because you're putting that lovely warm. It's like when we drink a hot drink, it's putting that lovely warm down the throat. But oh, a poor little thing. But the one good thing to remember, Rachel, is that you are producing antibodies. So the minute you got this bug, your body realized this bug was around you and your baby, you started producing antibodies, and you are providing protection. So hopefully your baby won't get this as badly as they could have done if you hadn't been feeding them. So imagine, you're doing this wonderful job of giving your baby those antibodies in your milk to protect your baby, and they will recover nice and quickly. But in the short term, I would have thought feeding would help, because it helps soothe the throat. It might be initially it's a bit sore, but once they get into it, and maybe have a look at, I don't know how old your baby is, but maybe some form of pain relief, and then that may help improve the feeding. You know how it feels, you take a couple of paracetamol and you feel so much better and can face things, whereas if you're in the full throes of a really nasty cold and a very sore throat, you're not inclined to have very much. Obviously, Rachel, if you are concerned about your baby, do get medical care. Contact your GP, or if you're very concerned, go to A&E. But just see how you're getting on. Again, depending on how old your baby is, if they're very young, then we don't really want them going any length of time without food. If they're a bit older, if we're talking a good few weeks into months, then they've got some fat reserves laid down, and they may cope all right with a day or so of not feeding very well. And just keep your baby close. Hug them and keep them, because that's going to conserve energy anyway. Keeping them as close as you can, and that will help. Poor thing though, you're saying about him fussing and screaming and trying to feed and then giving up. But so again, yeah, think about maybe that. I'm just going to 5 months. You've put down here. He's had some paracetamol. Okay, brilliant. Well, let's hope that paracetamol kicks in, Rachel, and that and sort of time it, give that paracetamol a little bit of time, and then try a feed and see if you can do it. Then it's it's like we do. You wait till you feel a little bit better, and then you can face it. So at 5 months, a day or so of not feeding particularly brilliantly won't have any great harm on your baby, but just meet their needs for love and being near you, and because it's obviously feeling a bit rubbish, and you probably are too, I should think. So a baby moon might be uncalled for. So it's when you both take to your bed and have a big cuddle in bed and don't do anything and let everybody else do it for you. So that's rubbish. I feel really sorry for you, Rachel. That's not fun. So hopefully you'll get over it soon, and just remember what an amazing job you're doing, giving your baby all these antibodies, that they won't get it as badly as they may have done. Lindsay has said, my third baby is just over 24 hours old, and having fed my last child for almost 4 years, and also being a midwife, I'm quite confident feeder. However, little one is very chilled and won't open his mouth very wide to latch. I've tried all the usual, but can you give me any tips on how to encourage him to open his mouth further to improve his latch? I just want to avoid any damage in these early days. Too right. It's remember to get your baby to reach for the breast, Lindsay. Let me grab a doll and breast. Oh, would you believe it? I didn't bring a doll with me. How silly. Huh, I grabbed everything from the office. This happens when you're on your own. But it's thinking about making sure that when you line your baby up, I'm going to have to do it with my hand. So when you line your baby up, that you've got them so that their upper lip is only just skimming the nipple, so that they've got to reach. So if I do it on myself, so if you imagine you line your baby up and then they go on, but I want to feed because this is the nipple. I want to feed, so they then have to tip their head back. Don't make it easy. Don't have the nipple by the mouth. Make it a bit more difficult. So the baby's got to reach. And remember, you're going to push from here. So the issue is obviously you've been feeding an older baby and you have to get this baby in the right place because it's so different. I was chatting in breastfeeding clinic this morning about how feeding an older baby, they do baby gymnastics. You end up with baby coming over the shoulder, or sort of coming up, standing up next to you, or doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But a newborn, again, as you know, you have to be in charge. So think about lining your baby up so that the nose to nipple, regardless of what positioning you're in, whether you're holding them here, you've got them here, or underarm, whatever you're doing, your nose to nipple. And that means that when they want to feed, they have got to tip their head back. So they've got to do that. And that's the way you tease them to open their mouth. Make sure when you're holding your baby that you're holding them across the shoulders here, so that you're not holding them any higher to stop the head tipping back. You want to be holding them right down here. I can see a teddy bear. I'm going to use that one. So it's thinking about, I'm going to use a teddy today, so thinking about holding your baby so your hand is here. I use the analogy of a hairdresser's sink. So imagine this is the hairdresser's sink. So you're going to put your baby into the hairdresser's sink. You're going to tip the head back into it so the head can tip back. So you would start nose to nipple, and then they tip their head back, and then they go on. And you're pushing from here, not up here. It's down here, so it's the equivalent of being pushed from this part of your back and not up here. If you push from here, you do this. If you push from further down, so if you're right down here, you do this. And anyone who knows me from clinic will know I'm always saying, think about me doing this. That's what you're aiming to do. You want your baby coming on in that position. So I know that's me teaching grandmothers to suck eggs, as they say, because you're a midwife and everything, but it's just a reminder, because when you have fed an older baby, it's very easy because you just pop them on. They do whatever they need to do. They get the mouthful they want. They adjust themselves. But with a newborn, you need to be in charge again. So think of the real basics. Think back to your your training. It's nose to nipple. Let that head tip back, because it's free to tip back the way you're holding the baby, and then you're going to push from here and the baby goes on in that movement. And because it's up here, they have got to open their mouth. See how you get on, and hopefully things improve. And I'm absolutely right, you want to get it right now. You don't want to end up damaged before you've even got a few days into feeding. That would be terrible. So congratulations on having your third baby, so that's very exciting. But, and it's lovely to hear how long you fed your other babies for too. It's inspirational for other people. So we talk about breastfeeding length, from the point of view of it. It's a relationship of two people. There are two people in this. We call it a dyad. So it's the mother and the baby, and you both have a say in the matter. So ideally, you feed exclusively for the first 6 months, because we know that has the most optimal health outcomes. And then at 6 months, you'd start introducing other foods. And anyone who's watched these sessions before that know that we always say food before one is just for fun. That comes from our colleague Hannah, who's one of the infant feeding team as well. And so thinking about 6 months onwards, your milk is still the predominant part of your baby's diet. It's the most important part of the baby's diet, alongside other foods. And then when they're getting to a year and beyond, breast milk is an addition to all of it. It's still beneficial. Babies still get benefit from it. But they're getting more and more other foods then as well. But there's so much, as I've mentioned, to do with breastfeeding, way more than just food, that it's beneficial for both mother and baby. I don't know if you remember, hopefully you've been told, that for mums who are breastfeeding, it protects them against 2 types of cancer, so cervical and breast cancer. It protects them against osteoporosis, diabetes, obesity, cardiac illnesses. And mothers who have got diabetes, you know, if they're gestational diabetic, it protects them against going on to develop type 2 diabetes. Every month, every year that they breastfeed is upping the protection that they're getting. Mothers who breastfeed have much better glycemic control, so that's to do with insulin, much better glycemic control because they're used to processing it. So all these things are there to promote good health for you, and you're more likely to space your babies slightly more, you know, up to 2 years apart, depending on how you get on. But from a maternal point of view, there are so many good reasons to breastfeed as well. Anyway, so moving on, so I was just saying about all of that. So congratulations, Lindsay, on number 3. And I'm assuming you're not in, I'm sure you're at home, but if you need some more support, make the most of your community midwives, or contact us and see how we get on. So, Kimberly has said, not really a question, but it links in with the brain development topic. We have transferred our 15-month-old into his own cot. Oh, the question's just jumped. Bear with me. It just jumped down into his own cot, and he just won't settle in it. He feeds to sleep. I transfer him, but he wakes every 40 minutes to 1 hour, when I then feed him back to sleep again. We've made the decision to co-sleep with him when we go to bed ourselves, so I can easily feed on demand throughout the night instead of getting up and down constantly. I just wanted to say it's the best decision we've made. We all get a good night's sleep. It stops me getting irritated when he won't settle, and we're generally happier. I know co-sleeping is a bit touchy subject, but I really think if you're considering it or struggling with a wakeful baby, to give it a try before turning to sleep training. Kimberly, thank you for that, and that's a very key topic that comes up over and over again. The thing about co-sleeping is ensuring that you can try and reduce the risk. So when we talk about co-sleeping, it's doing it with all the information. So we can never eradicate risk. We can't ever do that, but we can minimize risk. So when you're doing something like co-sleeping, and many mothers over the world will do it, and many will say they're not but are doing it, so which is why it's really important we give you the up-to-date and correct information. So it is thinking things like ensuring that the baby has got their own covers. So you maybe have your baby in a sleeping bag, you know, one of the baby's special grey bag ones, or just a blanket over them, that they're not under your duvet. Your duvet is just on you and not on your baby. That they're on the outer edge of the bed, that they have got something to stop them falling out, whether you've put your Moses basket up against the bed or you've got a cot side, something to stop them rolling out of the bed. That they are not between 2 adults. Now that is really dangerous, so they must not be between 2 adults, they must be on the outer edge of the mother. That you've not been drinking alcohol or taking anything that would make you sleep more, that means you wouldn't rouse for your baby, and that you don't smoke. Smoking is one of the biggest risk factors when it comes to sudden infant death, so no smoking if you're sharing a bed with your baby. And I don't mean in the bed, I mean just smoking generally, because it stays on your breath for a long time afterwards. So if you can do all of those things, you are minimising the risk. What mothers do when they are co-sleeping is they will adopt a side-lying position, like a recovery position. So if I were lying on my left, I would have my arm, and it probably look the right to you because it goes around the wrong way. I would be lying, and this would be my anchor, and I'd have pillows here between my hand and my head. And I'd be lying on this side, and my top leg would be down as a brake, like putting someone into a recovery position. That means you're not going to roll onto your baby. And mothers who are co-sleeping will adopt that position quite naturally, and the baby then goes in the gap here. If you want more information about it, the places to have a look are BASIS, which is an organisation set up out of Durham University, which is the Baby Advisory Sleep Information Service. I hope I got that right. And the other place to look is the Lullaby Trust. Both really good websites, lots and lots of information about how to minimise the risk should you be co-sleeping, and have a look. And when we say co-sleeping, that does include an afternoon nap. It doesn't, just because you're not sleeping the night through, but you may be taking your baby to bed with you in the afternoon for a nap, that counts just the same. All the safety precautions need to be put in place in that instance as well. The other thing to think about is not having any toddlers or pets around as well, because you as a mum respond to your baby's sleep pattern. So you go in sync with your baby, and you respond and you hear the baby. Partners maybe don't do that. Toddlers certainly do not, and neither do pets. And so that's why you, as the person looking after the baby and sleeping with the baby, are the one that is going to be responding and being aware of when your baby is awake, in a way that other people aren't. So that's why it's important that it's you. Anyway, that was just following on from your comment, Kimberly, and it, as you say, for some people it is transformative, makes such a difference. We know that mothers, regardless of whether they're co-sleeping or not, mothers that are breastfeeding are likely to get 45 minutes more sleep a night than a mother that is formula feeding. Now, I can only put that down to maybe having to get up and make bottles, and also the release of hormones that you, when you're feeding, that help you to relax and go back to sleep. Which would not be happening if you were not breastfeeding. So, there are lots of things in play here. But Kimberly, thank you for putting that up there, because I'm sure there are quite a few people who have considered it and maybe have tried it in desperation. But if you are trying it in desperation, please make sure that you are minimising the risks. Make yourself and your partner aware of the Lullaby Trust information and basis. Have a look at both of them. They have some really great information, and it will help you minimise the risks there. As I say, we can't eradicate them, but we can minimise them. Emma has put a bit more up. So she does the same amount of time, minutes, hours spent breastfeeding per day matter, or is the number of feeds more important? I track feeds on an app so I can remember last time, etc., but it also counts hours per day, and although it has now been more regular, the time does fluctuate. Is this due to baby becoming more efficient? Thanks. So this was Emma with the baby who is doing a lot of cluster feeding in the evening. It's really common, Emma, for babies not to feed for the same length of time all the time, which is why we talk about a feed being somewhere between 5 minutes and 40 minutes as a norm. So we say that we expect a baby to anticipate a baby will feed a minimum of 8 times in 24 hours. 8 to 13 is a really fairly average amount, and many babies will do even more than that. But we don't normally see breastfed babies doing less than 8. The length of the feed will vary, and some mums will find that they have periods of the time where the baby's really efficient, gets on, feeds and comes off, and other periods of time where they take their time. And I always equate it to, you're in a hurry, you're off to work, you're going to bolt your breakfast, and comes the evening and you're going to have a nice chat with your family, or your partner or whoever, and you take your time. So it's just the same with a baby. So some feeds they're going to be in a hurry to get it done, and other feeds they're going to take their time and enjoy it and be leisurely. So it is very much, that you'll see that during the day the length of the feed will vary considerably. Many parents find that actually the nighttime feeds can be quite efficient. The baby wakes, they're fed, they go back down, or wherever they are, they go back to sleep. Whereas others, might find they're longer, but everybody is different. I was having this conversation this morning in breastfeeding clinic. We were talking about a baby, and the mother was asking, was it normal? And I said, but every baby is different. We're all different. How we have our days, the rhythm of our days is different, and it's very much the same for our babies, and they really do have a personality from the moment they're born. You can really see the differences. And anyone out there, for instance, like was it Kimberly who had it was Lindsay, who's on number 3. Lindsay will tell you, as a mum of now 3, that each of her children will have been different, and they will have different. And right from the off, you have babies that are just chilled as can be, and you're really having to encourage them to feed. And you've got other babies that, unless they're feeding, they're really shouting, and they're feeding all the time. And that's, and those babies can be growing similarly. So every baby is different. The upshot of all of that was, Emma, to say, a minimum of 8 feeds in 24 hours is what we would normally anticipate, and a feed can vary from 5 to 40 minutes on each side. So you think about offering 2 on each side, and it can vary from different parts of the day. The same baby can have some feeds that are 5 minutes and some that are 40, and that's all considered to be normal. Wow, I've whipped through, there's no more questions. You'll have to send me a few more, otherwise I'll have nothing to talk about. So I'll just refresh just in case there's any come through. And think about all the questions that you've been asking. Those that I've suggested contact us would be great. But, going back to the brain development, because that has come up here, it is really interesting to think that they're talking about bringing this into, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the Duchess of Cambridge, talking about the importance of brain development in babies. That they're thinking of bringing it in and teaching teenagers about this, which is great because obviously that fits in with all other aspects. It would be lovely if we were also teaching about feeding, if they understood what the norm is when it comes to feeding, because a lot of what we consider to be norms are based on formula feeding in the UK. You know, this thing about going periods of time between feeds, where you know, Emma's just asked about the frequency of feeds. Well, many babies, breastfed babies, we couldn't put a number on how many times they feed because it's really common for them to feed frequently. If you went to other parts of the world where they're less, have less of an idea about, you know, how many feeds in a day, and you asked a mother, she wouldn't have a clue, because many times they have babies that strap to them, or they have free access at night, and the end result is that baby will help themselves whenever they want, and those mothers may not have any idea how many times a baby feeds in 24 hours. I was talking about the ability to space your pregnancies with regard to feeding, and free access at the breast is part of it. So in parts of the world where feeding is used as a form of contraception, those babies will have free access at the breast. They won't be being put down in cots or prams or taken away. They'll be kept with mum all the time, and they feed whenever they want. And that's very, very protective against going on for, you know, for other pregnancies. In the UK, because we are more inclined to put our babies down, we are more inclined to have them in a cot or in a car seat if you're going somewhere, not having them always on your front, then this is where exclusive breastfeeding as a form of contraception is perhaps slightly less reliable, which is why we don't necessarily use it as a form of you know, a formal form of contraception. An informal form it really is. So, but any more questions for me? It'd be brilliant if you had a few more. This is where we need Naomi and her great filling in. So just having a look to see whether we covered everything that was here. If I've missed your question, will you please say, because on occasions questions come through and we miss them. It's happened a few times, so it would be really brilliant. Well, while I wait to see if any of you have got any more, I'm just going to talk about the magical hour again. Now, I know we talk about this quite a lot, but I just want to say, if anybody's out there haven't had their baby yet, can I remind you about how important it is to, oh, I can see a flurry coming through, lovely. I'll just talk about this and then I'll go through to them. And I just remind you about how important uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact is for the beginning of your breastfeeding relationship. This is so crucial. The reason I'm holding this up, this is a lovely poster that we've got, and it's called the magical hour. The first hour after birth, a baby's instinctive 9 stages. If you look it up, you can find this online, and it talks about what a baby does, and regardless of where they're born, whether they're born here in the UK, in Alaska, in America, wherever, you know, any country in the world, a baby will go through the same process. So they're born, they normally do cry, or at least they inflate their lungs, and then they have a period of time of resting. Then they'll do a bit of wriggling, and then if they're in a really good alert state, which most babies are, as long as they haven't had any any of the pain relief's gone through to them, they would actually make their way forward toward the breast. They do crawling, and they'll get there and self-attach. This we all hope will happen within the first hour and a half after birth, and the reason for that is that this is a really, really important priming time. It's a time when the baby's brain is being, sort of primed to what they've got to do. Firstly, they've never met a breast before, so your breast is the only breast they know. So regardless of what your breast is like, that's normal for your baby. So don't let anybody tell you that you've got flat nipples, inverted nipples, or whatever. Let your baby deal with what you've got. Give them the chance to do that. Now, on occasions, babies struggle, and we'll help you with that. But assume your baby will do it, because your breasts are the only breast your baby will ever meet. And to your baby, your breasts are normal. Leaving them there to go through the stages is important, because as if you can see on this, it's numbered. If we lift the baby off maybe at stage 5 and go and pop it on the scales, or have a cuddle with someone else, or maybe think about dressing it, then actually when you put that baby back, hoping you haven't dressed it, back to number 1, then the baby goes back to the beginning. Now, they're only alert for an hour to an hour and a half after birth, and then they go to sleep. And sleep will happen regardless of where they've got through the 9. So what we really, really want this baby to do has got through all the way to number 8, where they're feeding, before they hit number 9, which will happen automatically anyway, so that they've done that priming feed. Because that priming feed is when the baby learns all about you, learns about your breasts, learns about feeding, and then it's locked in its brain. And even if we have problems thereafter, even if the baby then struggles, that baby knows what they need to do, and we can reawaken that and get your baby feeding again. So from the point of view of anybody out there who hasn't had their baby yet, think about uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact. Pop it on your birth plan. Go and do a little bit of reading about the golden hour, or the magical hour, or the 9 stages after birth, and it will all talk about how important this time is for getting your breastfeeding journey off to a good start. Get your other halves involved. You know, whoever your birth partner is, get them there as your advocate to support you, to make sure that you get this uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact. That means your baby is on your front and not moved, and they stay there until they've fed. And that will get you off to the best start you can. Anyway, let me go back to these questions, because I can see a flurry coming through. Right, so we did Emma, then we'll go back to Esther. Hello, Esther again. Sometimes I find when I'm feeding, he'll feed for a good amount of time and then spend ages just flutter sucking. I don't know what the term actually is, but I just wondered if he's still feeding when he's doing this, or is it just a comfort thing? So the thought is actually toward the end of a feed, Esther, is that actually what they're getting is that high fat milk that I mentioned. So they're doing little flutters, but they're actually getting little dollops of high fat milk. So it's really highly calorific. So this is why we say, please don't take your baby off before they've finished. Because when a baby goes on, they get rewarded. They go chomp, 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 as you know, and they get rewarded with the letdown, which is that sort of big dollop of milk. Huge amounts of that lovely water-soluble vitamins, lots of loads of lactose, and then the volume drops, but the fat content's increasing. And this is where that your baby's doing that sort of the little flutter, big pause, little flutter, big pause. And this is the high-fat part here, and that's why we don't want to take them off. If you took them off, you're going to deprive them of all that lovely high-fat milk, and that's what settles babies' tummies. It means that it produces those lovely yellow poos. It helps them go that little bit longer between feeds. So as much as you can, Esther, let him finish the feed on his own. If you need to, you could encourage him with some hand expressing, because that will help get milk into him too. So you'd have him on and then do, it's not hand expressing, sorry, compression. So nice big handful of breast, nice big compression, in and hold while he's sucking. So he'll get that bit more when he's doing his little flutter sucks, and then he stops and you release, and he starts again and you compress. And that will just give him that bit more. And then reminding him that he's at the breast. So sometimes you might want to just put a bit more pressure on his shoulders. I'm always saying about the pressing the on switch, pressing on his shoulders, reminding him why he's there. And if he's been there a long time without doing anything, maybe just lift your breast and see if he lets go. Sometimes they do need a bit of encouragement to come off, but we don't really want to take them off on their own. We want them to come off because they've chosen to. And that means that they've gone through what we call the profile of the feed. They've got their lovely big dollop of quantity of milk with high lactose and lots of soluble vitamins, and then into the lower volume but high fat milk. Right, hope that answers that, Esther. Felicity has said, my little 35-weeker is now 12 weeks and over 10 pounds. He started to sleep for 5 hours overnight, leaving me a bit swollen. Do your breasts adjust? They do, but be careful. Obviously, don't let yourself get too full. If you wake up thinking, oh, I'm really full, take off enough to make yourself comfortable. Don't let them stay like that. When you're very full, there's a protein that builds up in your breast, in the milk, called FIL, feedback inhibitor of lactation. If it's allowed to build up, then it cuts your milk production down. So if you wake up thinking, crikey, that's 4 hours and I'm feeling really full, take off enough to make yourself comfortable. Don't feel you have to take the whole amount off that you can get off, but enough to make yourself comfortable. And then you've got a little bit of milk for later anyway. And then, you know, you can feed your baby when they wake up. Alternatively, if you wanted to, you could pick your baby up. So when we talk about responsive feeding, that means you have the choice to feed too. So you could try and give your baby a dream feed and see if they take off that full amount, and then you might find they actually go a little bit longer. So this might be a bit shorter, but then you might get another gap afterwards. But don't let your breast get too full. Not only can you end up with the milk supply dropping, but you could also end up with mastitis if it's unaddressed. So, you know, thinking about keeping your breasts comfortable at all times. So if you've woken up, you're feeling really full, and you are not inclined or can't persuade your baby to feed, take some milk off, and then, you know, feed your baby when they're ready, and see how you get on. They will adjust, and what you'll find is that you need to take less and less off as the breasts get used to it, but don't let them get really, really full. Keep your breasts comfortable. We're always talking about this, about engorgement, mastitis. It's expressed for comfort in those instances. If you don't need to push your supply, then you want to be making sure you keep your breast comfortable at all times. Hope that works. That's okay for you. And congratulations on your baby being 10 pounds. That's phenomenal. That's absolutely brilliant from a 35-weeker. Well done, you. Charlotte has said, question, is there a certain amount that Alicia needs to eat? Can't believe this year's coming. She'll be 2 years old. I won 2 tickets to the baby and toddler show at Sandown this year, coming with her mum to taking me and Alicia to the Rugby League World Cup, and then the Remembrance Cenotaph and Lord Mayor show. My word, you're going to be busy, Charlotte. Really busy. No, there's not a certain amount. We all eat differing amounts, as long as she's growing, you know, as long as she's meeting her milestones and following her centile. You know, in the red book, I was just thinking, because I know I have a red book here somewhere. Yeah. So thinking about your red book and looking at your centiles at the back. So you want your baby to be, you find the centiles. I'm going to find the pink ones because Alicia's a little girly. So you've got your girl's weight. So we want her to be following a line. So we don't really want her dropping down. She might go down a bit, she might go up a bit, but we don't want her going down too. So it's making sure she's following her own line, and we're all different. So I'm not very tall. In fact, I'm very small. And so all my children sat down here, right down the bottom. They were at the bottom, right at the bottom, but there'll be other babies that are going to be up here. That's normal, because this is an average. So we're looking at some being below, some being above, and some being in the middle. But as long as they're on a line and they pretty much follow it, that's what we're looking for. So it's really, you know, we're not looking for great shakes when it comes to that. We just want them following their own line. And enjoy all those wonderful things you're going to do, Charlotte. That sounds amazing. Finley's put, hi, I'm a student midwife here. I've recently been looking into the changes in breast milk, which I've found extremely fascinating. It's amazing what our bodies can produce. One thing that I've come across is the changes in the colour of breast milk. What causes this, and does this affect quality, nutrients, etc.? Does it change for everyone? So, Finley, one of the things we do know is that if you have a lot of beta carotene, then your clostrum's likely to be more yellow. Everything that a mother eats is going to have some representation in the milk. So you can have breast milk that can look like dirty dishwater. You can have breast milk that looks maybe a bit on the green side or the blue side. It never really looks like cow's milk as such, because it doesn't have the same protein profile as cow's milk. So we have casein and whey, and casein reflects the light. And there's a lot more casein in cow's milk than there is in breast milk. So cow's milk looks whiter than breast milk because casein's reflecting light. It doesn't mean that because your milk doesn't look as white as cow's milk, it's no good. It means it's absolutely fantastic for your baby. And, you know, I have heard it described as looking like dirty dishwater, but it's still perfect. Every mother's milk is going to be slightly different. It's going to be based a bit on what she's eating. You know, it's going to be based on her environment. There's going to be changes throughout. It's very interesting. I can't say necessarily, apart from the beta carotene, what affects colour as such, but we do know that you know, babies can pick up flavours. So when it comes to introducing other foods at 6 months, as I was mentioning earlier, babies that have been breastfed are much more likely to be able to cope with different flavours than babies that have been formula fed, because formula milk tends to be a fairly standard taste. Breast milk is constantly changing because of the foods that a mother is eating. And Naomi and I've mentioned this a number of times on here, but when they looked at babies to see whether they preferred breast milk that had a vanilla tinge to it or a garlic tinge to it, it was found the babies preferred the garlic, believe it or not. So who'd have thought? Having said that, breast milk is very sweet. It's the sweetest of all milks, of all mammalian milks. And the reason for that is it takes us straight back to the beginning of what I was talking about right at the beginning, is brain development. So we are growing babies' brains. So we're not growing long limbs, we're not growing big muscles, which is what we are with cows and cow's milk. We're growing babies' brains. Human babies grow much, much slower in body-wise compared to other animals, other mammals. But what they are doing is growing their brain, because our brains are the biggest in proportion to our body. So we're growing these brains with lots and lots and lots of sugar. So we have the highest sugar content of all mammalian milk because we're fueling a baby's brain. Whereas if you look at, for instance, a hooded seal is weaned within 4 days. It's doubled its birth weight in that period of time. And if you looked at the fat content of a hooded seal's mother's milk, it's phenomenal. It's predominantly all fat. And the reason for that is that baby needs to be able to be left on the ice by 4 days and have enough fat around its body that it's not going to freeze to death. So our milks are completely adapted to the babies that we're having. So we're growing brains, we're growing babies with brains, slow growing bodies, and that's what we're meant to be doing. Cows are growing long limbs, big muscles, and seals in their instance are putting on a ton of fat to protect their babies. So those are some of the things that are different. I can't tell you, Finley, specifically about the colours. I'd have to go back to my books and have another look and see if I could see anything. But as you say, human milk is constantly changing to meet the baby's needs. Constantly. And the wonderful thing is that when you think about Felicity having her baby at 35 weeks, her body knew that baby was early. Her body adapted the milk to meet that baby's needs. So because her baby was early, her breast milk had more long chain fatty acids in it than it would have done if her baby had been born at term. And the reason for that is because a baby born prematurely is missing out on that time inside and that into utero. They're not getting that added time of fat, sort of long chain fatty acids for brain development and eye development, and the mother's milk compensates and produces more long chain fatty acids that is there for brain and eye development. So it is amazing to think that our milk is constantly changing to meet a baby's needs, and even aware of when the baby's born. It's born early, it changes the milk constituents to meet that baby's needs. And as you get to 6 months, you've got mother's milk that's got more lysozyme, and that's an antibacterial, and that's protecting the baby because they're now learning to put things in their mouth. They've got that hand-eye coordination, and now they're going to be putting things in their mouth, and they need more protection from the environment. So lysozyme goes rocketing up in human milk near that period of time when they need that bit more protection. So those are just a couple of examples of the constant changes going on to meet the baby's needs. And we talked earlier about sore throats and bugs. Antibodies are constantly changing to meet the baby's needs. And those of you that have had your COVID jab, and can I please request that you do, I think the latest thing today was saying that the majority of women who are unwell with COVID and are hospitalised with COVID are the ones that have not had their jabs. So please, discuss it with your midwife, and unless you've got a very, very good reason not to do it, please have your COVID jabs. You are providing protection for your baby. It's been found in the amniotic fluid, the antibodies, and in breast milk. So you are protecting your babies by having that COVID jab. Anyway, so that was all coming from Finley's question. And yes, does it change for everyone? Everyone's milk's going to be individual. It's all changing. And that's where donated breast milk is fantastic, but nothing replaces a mother's own breast milk, because a mother's own breast milk is tailor-made for her baby and her baby alone. We love the fact we can use donated. It is absolutely fantastic to keep baby's human milk exclusive, because there are so many differences, so many things in human milk that cannot be replaced by formula. But a mother's own milk is better by far. I hope that answers your question, Finley. Susie has said, do I need to address sleep eating during the day. My 8-week-old falls asleep on my breast 90% of his feeds, frequently appearing to feed the entire time. Do I need to discourage this? If so, how? He's gaining weight and maintaining his centile during the day. He'll actively seek a feed before immediately passing out asleep. It's very, very common, Susie, for babies to sleep at the breast, and they can feed. They are removing milk even if they're asleep. So no, it's absolutely fine. It's very, very normal. What we would expect your baby to be doing though is to start the feed being fairly animated, removing milk initially and then drifting off. So I would like to think your baby is having some periods of the feed where they are fairly active in the feed, and then they're becoming more and more sleepy, and that's really fine. I mentioned about brain development. I mentioned about you can't spoil a baby, you can't love a baby too much. It's not possible. Babies cannot manipulate you, and this is not habit forming. Your baby falling asleep at the breast does not mean this is going to happen forever. Your baby will be able to fall asleep on their own going forward, but at this stage it's very, very common for babies to want to be at the breast and to fall asleep at the breast, and that's absolutely fine, and it's normal baby behaviour. It's the most fantastic mothering tool, and I listened to a really wonderful mini conference, a webinar about sleep, and how we in the Anglophone countries have a real issue with babies sleep and feeding, whereas in other countries they have no problems with the fact that actually babies will fall asleep at the breast, and that's all part of it. And the word that was used, and I'm trying to remember which country, it was Ushpavani, and it was this beautiful description of a mother feeding her baby to sleep as a normal thing. Don't worry, this isn't habit forming. Your baby has not got the capacity for this to be a habit. They haven't got the brain facility to do that. So it is not going to be something you're going to be lumbered with later, as your baby gets older. They will cope. This is normal for a baby of this age. So go with it. You could try compressions if they're not doing very much. As I mentioned earlier, compressions can increase the volume of milk a baby's getting at the breast, and it will keep that baby, getting more milk into that baby until they go, okay, fine, I've had enough, I'm going to let go now, and they'll come off. But a sleeping baby at the breast is really common, and don't underestimate how much milk they can still remove if they're quite sleepy. So I hope I've reassured you there, Susie. It's really, really normal, and I think many of the mums on here will probably go, yeah, my baby goes to sleep at the breast. And just remember, it's the most fantastic mothering tool. It's absolutely wonderful to be able to do that. Finley has said, thanks very much, super informative and just fascinating. It is, I have to say, when you start looking into the constituents of breast milk and how it's constantly changing, you've just got to marvel at the human body. We are so incredible. We really, really are at what we can do and how we meet the baby's needs. There are a few things that we have to add, and just to say, vitamin D is one of the things that if your baby is exclusively breastfed, because we live in the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm sitting here looking out of the window and it's a bit of a grey day, we don't get as much sun as other places in the world. If you are exclusively breastfeeding your babies, please take vitamin D supplements yourself, and please supplement your babies. Because we live in the Northern Hemisphere, because we're not outside all the time, we as a nation are vitamin D deficient. This is particularly relevant to anybody with darker skin, as it's affecting their ability for processing vitamin D too. So please, if you are exclusively breastfeeding your babies, and you're not supplementing with vitamin D, please do so. Take it yourself because it's good for you, but also give it to your baby. It's just a couple of drops. You can pop it straight in their mouth. You could pop it on the breast, and it's easily found. You can buy it in most chemists. So vitamin D drops are needed. It's not because our milk is deficient, it's because we as a nation are deficient. So we don't produce enough for ourselves, therefore we don't have enough going into our milk. So vitamin D would be something I would ask you all to think about giving your babies. So that was coming on from Finley. Charlotte then said also, we're hoping to go somewhere sunny, hopefully Tenerife or the Canary Isles sometime next year. Wouldn't we all love it? That's me saying about it. It's actually quite bright over the hills over there, but it is predominantly a fairly grey day. But wouldn't we all love a bit more sunshine? That would be great for your vitamin D, Charlotte. Susie said, thank you, I'm enjoying catching up with my reading. My 2-year-old is less impressed when he's home and trying to get on my breast for a snooze too. Oh, that is difficult, isn't it? That is difficult. When you've got one on one side and one on the other, it is quite challenging. So yeah, I do get that. But you are doing a fantastic job, and normalising breastfeeding with your 2-year-old, which is lovely, because I just think that's how all babies are fed, which we'd lovely. Audra said, thank you so much for all this fantastic information. Well, thank you for joining and putting feedback. That's really lovely. It just makes such a difference. Otherwise you just think you're talking to a camera, which is not great fun. Louisa said, how much vitamin D should be in the supplements that we as mums should take? Thanks. Now you've put me on the spot. I'm trying to remember. I think it's 1,000 international units. I will have to have a look and see if I can see it. Let me come back to you next week. Come and watch next week and I'll tell you how much it should be. I should know, but I don't remember. But whatever's normally in a, if you're taking a multivitamin of any sort, that will be plenty. They'll have enough in there. Whatever you get, if you're still taking pregnant care, if you've still got pregnant care, that will have plenty. It's just boosting your own vitamin D. So it's, there is an amount, and I can't remember off the top of my head how much is recommended. With babies, it's drops, and it will say on the bottle how much is needed. It depends on the strength of the one you've got. But it is well worth taking those supplements. So sorry not to be able to give you a distinct answer on that. If Naomi and I were working together, I'd be looking it up while she's doing, but I'm going to struggle with the questions otherwise. So I promise I'll come back next week and tell you how much it should be. Charlotte has a quick question. Is there any multivitamins we can get for Alicia? It's worth going and having a look at your local chemists and see what they've got. Vitamin D would be beneficial for her too, depending on how much she's getting from any other food. Babies that are receiving more than 500 mils of formula do not need to have vitamin D supplementation, because there's a lot of vitamin D added to formula. So if you're mixed feeding and giving more than 500 mils of vitamin D, you don't need to supplement. But from Alicia's point of view, you could maybe do drops. Sometimes there are chewable ones that she might cope with, but just going to have a look in your chemists and see what they've got. But it is worth it. As a nation, I say, we are vitamin D deficient, and it does do us a lot of good. It's great for you to have vitamin D. It's a very important vitamin. Vicky has said, I'm due to have my baby in January. I'd like to breastfeed her, and I'm hoping to do a few mornings or afternoons at work from March onwards. I do beauty treatments from a cabin in my garden, so won't be away for long. Could you tell me more? Tell me if combination feeding is an option, or whether the use of a bottle of Express would confuse things if my husband does the odd feed whilst I'm working. So I would say that in the first instance, Vicky, we would be highly recommending that you do expressing and have enough milk for your baby that way, so that your partner's giving express breast milk, because as I've mentioned earlier, optimal health outcomes are from exclusive breastfeeding or exclusive milk feeding, human milk feeding. So that might be a way to go, that you could do some expressing. I mentioned earlier that most mums find they have more milk in the morning. So actually many mums will feed their baby and pump after they've fed, and that will give them a feed for later. So that might be a way of ensuring you've got a bit of milk. You're not going to be going back to work for a few months, so ideally get breastfeeding established. Spend the first few weeks really getting breastfeeding established. Make sure you've got enough of a milk supply, and then start introducing a bottle after sort of 3-4 weeks or so, and then seeing how you get on. But get breastfeeding going and then do it. And many babies cope with breast and bottle. They happily go from one to the other. Many of the mums on here who've been in contact with us and had support from us have been doing that. Try not to bring it in too early in the first week or so, because that, unless you have to, because that can make it more difficult for the baby to learn how to breastfeed. But once breastfeeding is going well, you could be expressing and then ensuring you've got milk for the feed. If you start introducing formula, then actually and you're not expressing to replace that milk, your milk supply will go down over time. If you're mixed feeding and that's your choice, then that's fine. But just saying, if you wanted to keep your baby human milk exclusive, then expressing would be the way to go. And many mums do that, and from earlier than 3 months. In fact, we're very lucky in the UK. If you looked at maternity situation in the States, there's no agreed maternity leave in the States. So mothers in the States, it's totally at the discretion of their employer, and many mums in the States are back at work within a number of weeks of birth, but carry on breastfeeding and are expressing. So it is feasible. Mothers do it. So it is very, it is very possible to do that. Places like Latch League would be a good place to go and have a chat with them. I'm sure they've got like mums who have returned to work and are more than happy to talk to you about how to do it. You can contact us, Abingdon Baby Cafe or Abingdon Breastfeeding Cafe, and OBS. All of us, any of us, would be more than happy to talk you through it. Think about getting yourself a nice pump, a good pump. We would normally recommend a double electric pump, just because a single hand pump is very good for the occasional pumping, but if you're going to have to do a fair bit of pumping, then actually many of the smaller electric double pumps are really good and will work really well for you. And we can talk you through pumping to maximise your efforts on that. But I think, see how you get on. There's no reason why you couldn't be feeding your baby all your own milk. It's very, very feasible. Many mothers do it, and you wouldn't, unless you want to, you don't need to have to give formula as long as you've got that milk supply. So I hope that's reassured you, Vicky, and there's no reason why your baby couldn't just have your milk. Esther's come back. I have lots of pregnant care vitamins left which contain the folic acid. Can I still take these as they have vitamin D in, but is the folic acid okay while breastfeeding? Absolutely, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about taking it. Yeah, you should be fine with that. And lots of mothers carry on their pregnant care after the babies are born. And Charlotte's come back. Thanks. I just fit well. Yeah, she's just saying, Charlotte's just saying she wants her baby, Alicia, fit and well, and she's going to be a great mum. Well, you are a great mum. You're always putting fabulous things up here about what you're doing. You're a fabulous mum, Charlotte. Vicky's come back. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Now, how are we doing for time? Oh, the screen I'm on's not got time on it. Let me have a quick peek and see if I can see. Oh, we're at 36. So, any further questions, or shall we sign off till next week and I'll go and do my research? Oh, Leanne's come on. Oh, it's not come on this screen. I can see Leanne's name on my phone. Let me just get your question up. Just reloading it. It doesn't like your questions, does it? Oh, there it is. Leanne's responding to Vicky. Yeah, just checking, that's who you were responding. OBS did a great session on breastfeeding and returning to work. I'm sure they'll repeat the session again. Have a look on their Facebook page. Brilliant idea, that's really good. OBS have some great resources. We work quite closely with all the infant feeding organisations locally, and we have quarterly meetings with them all. So and they do some fantastic stuff, so do make the most of the resources. That sounds like a really good recommendation, Leanne, to go and contact OBS and find out and have a look and see if they've got it. They may have recorded it and put it out. That would be good. Right, Charlotte's come up and thanked me. That's lovely. Thank you, Charlotte. It's always lovely to know you're here. You're one of our top watchers, and nice to see some lovely other faces too. Daniela, I hope we're going to have a chat about what's going on, and anybody else that feels they need a bit more support, please just get in touch. Give us a call. I'm about to go off to the wards. I think it's about 20 to 4. So I'm off to the wards now. I'm going to go see the mums I've got to see on the wards, and then I'll be back in the office, and both Sarah and I are in tomorrow. So if you need us, give us a call, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you for all your fab questions, and for those of you that are struggling with sore throats, etc. I hope things improve, and do access us if you think we can be of any help. Oh, I've just seen something else pop up quickly before I go. Sarah has said, I'm due this week and haven't bought a pump, bottles for expressing yet, or any formula, ready-made bottles in case of an emergency. Is this okay? So, Sarah, we assume you're going to feed your baby without a problem. With the wonders of, and I don't really like giving Jeff Bezos the money, but with the wonders of Amazon Prime, if you needed a pump, you could always have it the next day. So I'll just go with it. Supermarkets are open nigh on 24/7. I don't think they are fully again now, but don't need to buy anything yet. Just see how you get on, and only buy it if you need to. Most of the midwifery teams have pumps, so if you need a pump and they've got one, they'll lend you one. And if they don't, then we'll find a way of getting you a pump as quickly as possible. We have pumps in the hospital, so if you're having to pump with us, then we know that, and we'll help you to buy a pump. We'll point you in the right direction to buy pumps. And in the first instance, you're always going to be hand expressing. We're not going to get you on a pump for at least the first couple of days. The earliest we'll do that is probably day 2 for mums that are really pushing their supply, but normally it's not till your milk comes in. So Sarah, don't worry about it. You don't need to go and buy anything. And should you end up needing to formula feed, should that be your choice, we do have formula in the hospital and we will make it available. And my last thing to say about formula is just to remind you, and anybody who's watched these before will know I've said this before, but please remember, if you are formula feeding, all formulas have to meet UK requirements. They have all got the same nutritional value, whether you are buying the cheapest brand on the market or the most expensive brand. It is like buying branded paracetamol. You can go and buy Sainsbury's own brand paracetamol and it will do just as good a job as any branded name. So don't feel that you have to buy, if you are formula feeding, don't feel you have to buy a top end brand. All you're ending up doing is helping them with their advertising and their marketing budgets, because the same nutrition is found in all of them, because legally that's the requirement. So save your pennies and spend it on something else, and your baby will grow just the same. Anyway, I hope that's okay. I don't think we've got any more on there. So yeah, that's the last one. So that was my final thing. So next week I will check vitamin D and I will tell you, and I'll have my partner in crime, Naomi, with me. Thank you so much, one and all, for all your lovely comments and everything. Charlotte's saying she got hers in Aldi. So, and again, it'll have the same nutritional value as that versus any other make, any make you may have seen advertised on the telly. So it'll have the same nutritional value. Your baby will grow just the same. You will not be doing your baby a disservice. Right, thank you very much, one and all. I'm going to say goodbye because I need to go off and see the babies on the wards. And congratulations to those who've already had their babies, and I hope things go well. And Lindsay, if you need a bit more help, get in touch. For those of you who are expecting your babies, have a look at our website. We've got lots of stuff on there, really useful, that you can look up and just do a bit of homework before, and maybe see if OBS are doing an antenatal class as well, because they do some great stuff too. Anyway, thank you all and see you next week.